Page 7, Native Americans in Kentucky. Are Native Americans really native to America? Have they always been in America and Kentucky? Thousands of years ago, the land and oceans were different, and people from Asia could walk across a land bridge to what is now Alaska. From there, they slowly spread over America. Perhaps some also came by small boats across the Pacific Ocean. So Native Americans traveled to America too, just as other people did much later. Historians often also use the term American Indians because Indians are not really native to America. But whatever we call them, the Indians found themselves in a new land filled with animals that they could hunt, animals that could hunt them too. Finally, one Indian, or perhaps a whole family, came to what we now call Kentucky, and the first humans walked this land. That event probably happened at least 12,000 years ago. One generation is said to be 20 years. A grandparent, a parent, and a child thus make up 3 generations. Native Americans lived in Kentucky long before any other groups came here. 600 generations of American Indians lived and died here before the first European explorers even came to America. In contrast, only a dozen or so generations have lived in Kentucky since the time of our first written history. Some 600 Indian generations and 12 others. To see it another way, look at the 6-inch line below. If every inch stands for 2,000 years of history, then how long have people other than Native Americans lived in Kentucky? Page 8. Europeans have been in Kentucky only 1/8 of an inch on that scale, not very long. But change takes place over time, even for the American Indians who lived here so long. Archaeologists have divided that 12,000 years into 4 different periods, so let's look at each one. Paleo Indians, 10,000 BC to 8,000 BC. The name Paleo Indian refers to those original people who lived here a very long time ago. They came to Kentucky some 12,000 years ago, in 10,000 BC or before. At that time, ice covered most of the northern part of the United States. In that ice age, Kentucky was much colder than today. Its trees looked like those in the far north do now. Large lakes also covered part of the land. Little is known about the Native Americans who walked the land then. Animals that no longer exist were all around them, including huge mammoths and mastodons, Ice Age elephants. The Indians hunted for food using sharpened stone points on spears. They stayed in small camps of a few dozen people. With no houses, they used rock shelters or anything they could find in nature. Overall, they lived a hard, simple, short life. Probably no more than 5,000 people called Kentucky home. Their lives were very different from ours today. Still, they had the same human feelings that we have. They saw people being born and others dying. They loved and hated. They understood pleasure and pain. They laughed and cried. Caption under picture on page 8. Early Indians lived in small family-sized groups that moved around a lot. Page 9. They knew happiness and sorrow. They were not all alike, just as people now are not all alike. Some had different ideas or spoke different languages. Sometimes they lived at peace with each other. Other times they fought. We may not know that much about them, but we do know that they started the process of humans living in Kentucky. Caption under the picture at the top of page 9. Native Americans hunted the mammoths that roamed Kentucky at one time. They used the skin for protection from the cold and the meat for food. Archaic period, 8000 BC to 1000 BC. A century lasts for 100 years. The Archaic period went on for about 70 centuries. It is the longest period of Native American life in Kentucky. During that time, the land changed, becoming more like it is today. The Ice Age ended, the inland seas went away, and modern rivers started to flow. The population increased, and people did not move around as much. For food, they killed deer, elk, beaver, birds, and turtles. They also gathered and ate river mussels. They cooked all their food using heated stones. The archaic people also invented new weapons for hunting. The atlatl, see picture on page 10, allowed them to throw their spears a longer way. They made stone axes as well and used them to build dugout canoes. Near the end of the Archaic period, a small change in what they did started what would be a major change over the years. The American Indians in Kentucky began to grow squash, both for food and as a container. They began what would slowly become farming and a new way of life. Caption under the lower picture. Indians made their arrowheads and spear points from stone. Page 10. Caption under the picture on the top left. The atlatl helped Indians throw their spears farther. Caption under the picture at the top on the right. A favorite target was the deer. Caption under the lower picture on the left. Some Native Americans placed their dead in large earthen burial mounds. Woodland period, 1000 BC through AD 1000. For 2000 years, change took place gradually. People still mostly hunted for food and only added sunflowers and few other plants to what they grew. The two major inventions were pottery and a new weapon. Woodland Indians in the eastern and central part of Kentucky began making pottery around 1000 BC. Having bowls and pots allowed them to cook directly over a fire. In that simple society, however, it took 500 more years for pottery making to reach parts of western Kentucky. Later, around AD 800, a new weapon came to Kentucky. It was the bow and arrow. It spread rapidly, and Native Americans soon used it for both fighting and hunting. During this time, the Indians' lifestyle was becoming more complex. They used axes to cut trees and clear land, which changed their environment. Objects found in burial mounds, the Indians' graves, show that they had a strong belief in life after death. A woodland Indian. We do not know if he even had a name. Sometime around 2,000 years ago, Native Americans entered Mammoth Cave to dig minerals they found there. They did not know it was one of the largest cave systems in the world. They did know it was very big and very dark. An Indian man got up one morning, put on a brief piece of clothing, and left his camp for the cave. Perhaps he saw his mate making barrel-shaped pots as he was leaving. Perhaps others tending sunflowers in the fields watched him go. We don't know. We do know that he lit some reeds to use as torches and went 3 miles into Mammoth Cave. He was high on a ledge, digging some minerals and placing them in a pouch, when a rock fell on him. He could not get away. The cool air in the cave preserved his body for centuries. About 70 years ago, some people finally found the woodland Indian. He still reminds us of our link to those who lived and died before us. Caption on the right side of the picture at the bottom. The Mississippian Indians of the western part of Kentucky lived in large towns with big earthen pyramids. But the biggest change came at the end of the woodland period. Native Americans began to grow maize or corn. Corn, potatoes, tobacco, and tomatoes were all American crops unknown to Europeans. Only Indians grew them, and those crops created a new farming life in the next period of time.